Just going to pull up my GrabCAD print just so it's up on the screen and you don't have to look at me. Today we're going to talk about using Insight to control infill and how you want to build using TPU and PLA. Within GrabCAD print, these are pretty static. You can't really change much as far as the tool pathing goes for either of these materials. You're pretty limited on infill and you're limited to your contour width on the outside. So I'm going to show you how we can manipulate this just a little bit within GrabCAD, and then I will show you how we can manipulate this using Insight and create custom infill and correct for thin wall errors where you may have an air gap in there that needs to be corrected. So I have this little block here. It's just an easier geometry just for illustration purposes so you can kind of see what we're trying to achieve. So within GrabCAD print, I'm just going to go ahead and select TPU to start. I have my object selected, and you can see that we don't have tons of adjustment available here. We can adjust the body thickness, which is the outside shell. We can adjust the contour width, and but our infill density cannot be changed. So we've had a few questions recently about changing the density of the infill on TPU so that you can achieve a little bit softer geometry, more flex, a little bit more forgiveness for compression. But we can't really do much within here. Same goes for PLA. There's almost no adjustment for PLA. If you were to go in here, you can see that basically all we're going to do is adjust our contour width, and that's pretty much it. It's got a default infill density of sparse, and that's about it. So if you have a 370 or have access to Insight, you should be able to use the Insight software to do this. For those of you that do not have a 370 or access to Insight, there's a few features within here. GrabCAD Print Pro. There's a hollow and lattice structure that you can use to create variable density within your parts. This would work for both PLA and for TPU, but you may have to drill a drain hole in here just so you can remove the supports. And if you do not have GrabCAD Print Pro, you could do this in your native CAD with self-supporting angles on the interior of the part. So I'll just open up Insight now. And then if you guys do have any questions, Insight, a lot of people don't normally use it. I'm kind of a power user, so I might go through stuff a little fast. I am open to questions if you have any questions as I'm doing this. So I will get started. So basically all I did is just generate toolpaths. I brought that file that was in GrabCAD print over and just sliced it and generated toolpaths just so we can kind of see what's going on. But with the toolpath adjustments, you can see that there's not a ton of adjustability here. High density sparse is our only option for infill. And we can change the infill raster width. So that is our bead width going 45-degree angle across the part. And if I open up advanced parameters, we have some more adjustability in here, but we can't create a global toolpath for this. It won't allow us to change the infill, so we can't really do a ton. If I try to change this internal raster air gap, so that would be the centerline spacing of these rasters for our infill, the maximum you can adjust to is 60 thousandths, which really isn't a lot. If we wanted to make that softer, we need that to be something like 125 thousandths. So I will show you how to do that. So within Insight, there is an option here for custom groups. So we can create a toolpath for any layer, and we can override pretty much any default that exists in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new toolpath. And what we are trying to achieve is super low density on this TPU. So right now, you can see it's got the same defaults as it did before, even within GrabCAD Print and in Insight. But we want to create a sparse fill pattern to reduce this. Right here, there's a button that says Sparse Fill Controls. If we check this, it's going to move off screen, but it'll come right back here. We're going to check that, and it opens up a new set of toolpath parameters that we can adjust. So this gyroid pattern, we did this with one of our customers, and it turned out really good. I had never really printed with it, and I thought it looked cool, and it's kind of fun for this exercise. So we're going to do a gyroid infill, and we are going to create a 100,000th infill size. So select that. So we have our group here. And I'm just going to apply it to one layer just so you can see what it does. So I'm going to add that group to that layer, and I'm going to generate the toolpath. So you can see that has reduced the density of that layer considerably. So this should increase the flex of that part. So now what we can do is select the entire part. And we can add that group. And then this is for a single layer to toolpath, and then this will toolpath the entire group. So if I select that, it will toolpath the entire part. And then we can go through and see how that gyroid pattern works. Pretty cool. It's self-bridging. You can make that go a lot bigger. And on TPU, the problem is the material is so soft that it tries to fall in on itself. So you have to have a little bit of support underneath. So if you don't use, or if you use a larger diameter sparse, you'd have to create a bridging layer. And what I mean by that, I will show you. Modify. So we're going to add a new group. We're just going to create a new sparse fill. So on this one, we had gyroid before. I'm going to select a different pattern. We're just going to do alternating rasters. So this would be like the normal sparse that you would see on your parts currently. If you open it up, there would just be the crosshatch on there. We're going to create a raster air gap. It bumped off screen. I'll pull it right back here in a second. Here. I made my adjustment. You can see that I added a sparse raster air gap. So now the center line to center line spacing will be 125 thousandths. So I'm going to apply that to this entire block. Add G. So as you can see here, that's a pretty wide open infill. So this thing would be pretty squishy if you try to squish it, but the problem lies in these top layers. So all of your upper facing surfaces, they're trying to span a tiny toolpath across this big 125 gap. So what we need to do is create another group that kind of bridges over this, something maybe half of the distance, so it can span a little bit better, and maybe put 2 or 3 layers additional into there. So what we can do here is create a new group. We're going to use the same pattern, the sparse fill controls, alternating raster. I'll have to make my adjustments. It's going to pop off screen again. And we'll do something, because we were 125, maybe we'll do like 60 thousandths. So there we should always have 4 or 5 capping layers to the top surface so it looks nice and smooth. But we would like to add maybe 2 or 3 bridging layers above this one for this capping layer to sit on, so it is a little bit more smooth on the top surface. So I will just go to that group. 1, 2, 3, and we'll add and toolpath those groups. So now you can see it goes from that super sparse infill, a little bit less, And then there's our bridging layers over the top. So now you would have a part that has good surfaces and is kind of squishy on the interior. Yeah, so now with PLA, you have even less adjustment. I can show you here if I switch this to a different modeler. Switch over to PLA. So if I were to try to adjust my toolpaths here, you can see now that that option is completely grayed out. It is telling me you can't do anything to adjust this PLA toolpath setup. We can basically slice the part, generate toolpaths, and that's pretty much it. But we can override that once again using our custom groups. So for this exercise, I'll bring that up. And we will create a new group. So PLA always builds super duper sparse. As you can see here, it's got a 200 thousandths spacing on the interior. Maybe you need this to be a little bit more rigid. You're trying to use up some of your PLA that you've got laying around, but you need it to be more rigid than the standard PLA parts that you've processed in the past. So we can use this to override. So we'll go in and create a new custom group. And then the same thing here. We're going to do our include sparse fill. Again, it moves out the screen. And we're going to change our sparse raster air gap. We'll just go down to something smaller. We'll try like 75 thousandths. I apply that group to this layer, add. You can see it becomes a little bit more dense on the interior. So that could increase your compression strength a little bit, give it a little bit more rigidity. So that's how you can use Insight to control some of that using custom groups. So I don't know, I know there's a few of you that have used Insight, but if there's any questions on moving through there, or if anybody needs to see anything again, I can jump back in there and show you. Yeah, the custom groups is a really powerful tool. You can use these as well for if you wanted to modify your supports. So like even for PLA here, if you were to generate supports, it doesn't use the support material, it uses model material, and it generates this as a basic structure. So it'd be like a basic support if you were doing this with soluble. So you go in here and you could modify this as well. So we could create a new group. And we could use a template. So that's this tab down here. And there's templates for all different types of toolpaths, whether it be interior fill, top surfaces, support. There's a drop down for almost every single one of those. But any other questions with that process at all? I know there's a few of you that have done this. And then I was going to show you one other thing here quick, I forgot. So the thin wall. We have these features here. Sometimes when you're using GrabCAD print, you may have noticed with your thin walls that you have two contours that may not necessarily be touching each other. And then you may have some contours that are overfilled on each other and the ends are kind of goobery and it doesn't look super good. You can also use Insight to correct some of that stuff. So I'm going to go down the bottom here. Just going to toolpath some of this. So you can see like this one would be super overfilled and this one wouldn't be touching at all. So this might be kind of weak if you were to put lateral pressure on it. It could break right at the layer line. So I'll show you how to modify that. So we're going to create a new group and we're just going to bump up our contour width. And I think you can do this within GrabCAD print. You can also use a variable wall thickness where it may bump out the the curve boundary, but it could change your geometry, so that might not be desirable. So what we can do here is just change our contour width to 20 thousandths. Apply that group here, and Z, and you can see that fills that very nice. So now that's a little bit, gonna be a little bit stronger. That might have been a lot of information. So Insight, like I said, it's not, a lot of people aren't using it with all of the features that are in GrabCAD Print now, but there's still things that you just cannot do in GrabCAD. So we have to use Insight to do that. We do offer an Insight course here at AdvancedTek. So if you guys, anybody is interested in doing some Insight training, you can reach out to us at sales@AdvancedTek, and we can get you guys set up. Any other questions at all? Is there a max air gap that you would recommend with TPU? So, sort of. You have to have some sort of infill in there, and it has to be able to kind of span across, even if it does fall a little bit, it will catch up eventually, and you would just have to use additional bridging layers. If you went to like a 1/2 inch air gap on TPU, that would probably not work. It just wouldn't be able to span. I would probably say a 1/4 inch maximum, and then reduce it by 50% for 3 layers, and then 50% for the next 3, and then 50% for the next 3 until you get to your capping layers. And that's so, and I can't really tell you what shore value it would provide you by changing that infill. It's kind of a guess and check. But you know, you can, that shore 92 is pretty rigid. If you try to compress it, it doesn't move much. But if you change that to a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch air gap, it does get quite a bit softer. Any other questions? Otherwise, I think that's about all I got for today. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you stopping in. We are going to do this again next month. We have a few ideas. Like I said, we're open to suggestions. This one happened to come up because there was a few even in this group that had talked about how can we adjust our infill for these two materials, and we worked through it and tested some stuff out, and I thought it might be a good topic. So our customers always have good feedback. If you guys have any recommendations for something you'd want to see, we have more technologies than just FDM. We have our Origin, we have the Neo, we have PolyJet. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out or make any recommendations. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day. Go wild.